One of the most awaited updates for Victoria 3 is finally here. We're getting our very first combat rework. Granted, it is not the amazing combat rework that we were expecting, but it is a step forward. We're getting a lot of new features. We're getting a little bit more say when it comes to our armies, and our decisions and how we interact with the armies is completely revamped in a good way. Now, that being said, we still have a very long way to go until we get a proper combat system that people that play Victoria 3 would agree with me when I say would be a little bit more enjoyable. But this is a step forward, a step in the right direction, some would say, and it crushes a statement from the Victoria 3 development team given out earlier this year, in which they said that they will likely not change the combat system. This right here is proof that they probably will eventually change the combat system if they want the game not to die. Because let's face it, Victoria 3 is an amazing game. I'm honestly playing this game in my own free time. I'm having a ton of fun in it, and I think a lot of you are playing it as well and you're enjoying it. But all that being said, there are parts of the game which are lackluster. The main one that is lackluster being the combat system, and to a certain extent the Diplo system, both of which have actually received changes with the 1.5 beta patch. Take note, this patch is not yet officially released. That means there's a lot of placeholders, there's a lot of icons missing, which is why in this video you're going to see a lot of icons missing. Keep that in mind. By the point that 1.5 is going to be out, they also will likely hear out the community. So if you play Victoria 3 and join the game, go over to the Paradox forums, let them know your opinion about the 1.5 patch, if you enjoyed, what you like to see changed about it, or maybe what you like to see added or removed, right? Because end of the day, one of the things I really love about the Victoria development team is that they actually listen to the community, they listen to the player base, and a lot of the changes that we see today in this particular patch are the direct result of players having given their say on the state of the game and the development team having listened to the player base. If you guys are interested in the changelog itself, I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'm gonna go through some of these bits here, but I'm mostly gonna show you in game what exactly changed, so you have a little bit of a better idea of what I'm talking about with, you know, illustration. I just want to show you primarily first on the forum here where the changelog is happening, how the development team reserved, as always, the first comment for the development team to respond to comments. And look at this, almost all of the questions, or at least the big questions, have been addressed, and if they haven't been addressed yet, likely they will be in the future addressed, since you guys probably realized there's a Paradox Interactive tradition of interacting with the player base and answering their questions on the forums especially. I mean, of course, if you want to leave some comment for the Paradox development team for Victoria 3, you can leave it on this video also, and if I ever get the chance to talk to Martin, the game developer for Victoria 3 again in the future, I will of course bring it up. I actually had an interview with Martin back in the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, I never managed to release the video in time because by the time I finished editing it, it was pretty late. Domination already came out, and a lot of the things that were added in 1.2 changed by 1.3, and it was not much of a point in me releasing the video, which is a lesson learned. I need to edit fast. Alright, so let's start a brand new game here, and we're gonna choose just randomly one nation so we can essentially illustrate the changes, because it's not just military changes, there's Diplo changes, there's balance changes. Countries have actually had their starting buildings revamped. So for example, Prussia is one of those nations alongside the US and Britain, if I'm not mistaken, which is why we're gonna be playing as Prussia. Totally not because I have a massive fetish for the Prussians in any Paradox game. I don't have that. This is actually the first time I ever click on this nation. Now, as you probably realized, there's a new icon over here, and it only says PH. It stands for placeholder, if I'm not mistaken, because these icons are not finalized. By the point in which 1.5 is going to come out, they will be finalized, so just be patient if you want to play with the 1.5 beta patch. And in case you're wondering how you can play with the beta patch, you simply right-click on Victoria 3, go to Properties, go to Betas, and then you have the patch over here, 1.5 beta patch. Click on that and it's going to update to the beta patch, because I know it's not as obvious as, you know, many people don't know. If you didn't, hope this helped. If you didn't know, you're probably a cave troll, aren't you? When's the last time you saw the outside world, huh? You be honest with me now. Alright, so back to our profit intensifies. Did they actually just put profit intensifies over here? So at the start, you can have 2 companies. This can change later down the line. Now, for the Prussians in particular, we have some unique companies like Krupp, the famous one, of course, Rheinmetall, and then we have a lot of generic ones. Obviously, every company gives different bonuses, so this is one of the very first steps towards making playing different countries a different experience, because one of the major issues that we've had with Victoria 3 is that pretty much all countries kind of feel the same. There's not too much flavor to differentiate between them. This is the first patch in which they properly do that. Some would argue that the DLC, the flavor pack for France, would have been the first time, but I beg to differ. I really think that this is the actual first time when something like this makes a difference, because companies, you can only have 2 at the start, give different bonuses, and depending on what company you choose at the start and which one you choose afterwards, it's going to have a massive impact on your country's development from the very get-go. Now, obviously, because I'm a massive Krupp enjoyer, I'm going to get the Krupp, and I'm also going to get United Forestry Conglomerate simply because I want the extra infrastructure. Are these the best ones for Prussia at the start? No. Did I just randomly pick them up to prove a point? Yes. So, as you can probably notice here, the bonuses here, or penalties, will be applied to the railways in the case of Krupp, and in the case of the forestry will be applied once we have 100 prosperity in both cases. So you do get 0 prosperity when you adopt the company, and then you get prosperity growing as you go along in the campaign. Prosperity increases while stack productivity is at least 25 pounds or 1.25 the global average, and will decrease if it's below 5 or 0.5 the global average. What does that mean? It means that these particular factories, mines, or whatever buildings affect prosperity for that particular company. So for Krupp, steel mills, coal mines, and iron mines affect the prosperity. Whilst for the United Forestry Conglomerate, it is the logging camps and the rubber plantations that affect prosperity. The bonuses they give are, of course, different. And honestly, at the start of the campaign, you probably want something different than railways, because you're not going to have railways. But I'm thinking long term, and by the time that I get 100 prosperity, my country is going to be filled with railways. For that matter, by the time that I get 100 prosperity for the conglomerate, my country is going to have a lot of migrants, and I'm gonna need the extra infrastructure. That being said, the second one probably is not the best, let's face it. Literally anything else is better than that. Even like minting wouldn't be too bad, or steel mill building throughput, actually, since once we switch over to our third construction method, the steel frame building, steel is gonna be in huge demand, not only for us but the rest of the world, because everyone's gonna eventually switch to that production method. Now, speaking of, we also have some changes to our buildings. First change is that we have a separate factory, the explosives factory, which produces explosives. It is not the fertilizer plant anymore. It's 2 separate factories that you need to build. Fertilizer plant only produces fertilizers, and explosive factory only produces explosives. It can make it a little bit easier. It can also make it a little bit more complicated, but I actually like this change because from my test runs, it actually works a lot better than it used to before, since, you know, it's easier to know whether you need more explosives or you need more fertilizers, and then you just build that specific thing. You don't build a plant that produces both and you just need one of the 2, so the other one is literally a waste, right? You'd essentially be losing out on money if you don't need the secondary trade good. Also to be noted, we have military shipyards and regular shipyards. Same thing applies as with the explosives and fertilizers. One produces only clippers, the other one produces man o' wars, or, you know, eventually monitors or whatever they need to be producing. Focused hardwood production is also a pretty good addition here, and the vineyards are a thing now, producing only wine. I feel like in most of my campaigns, wine was a major issue, and the vineyards are likely going to be fixing that issue. Unfortunately for Germany, seems like only Rhineland can build vineyards, which is pretty big feels bad moment right there. There's really a lot of new production methods around, so I recommend whenever you start the 1.5 beta patch, you just, before you actually start the campaign, go around your various buildings and see what's added, because for example, the intensive wool gathering here also makes a pretty significant change if you're lacking fabric, right, and you really need that extra fabric. But of course, it is going to lower the amount of fertilizers and meat that you produce from your livestock ranches, and as we all know, not every country can afford factories that produce fertilizers. A lot of people rely on livestock ranches for fertilizers early on in their campaigns. Take note, we also have the war machine industries that produce produce only airplanes, but that's for much later in the campaign. You don't need to worry about that at the start, so we're not really going to discuss it too much. In the development tab, we have barracks and we have the type of unit, and that's it. We don't have the other added things because if we go over to our military, this has been completely changed. Instead of generals that have units assigned to them, we now have army groups, as I like to call them. I think Paradox actually calls them formations, if I'm not mistaken. And then you click on each formation, and then you can assign up to 4 generals for each of the formations, and all 4 of these generals can have separate orders. So if you click on them, you can go advance front, defend front, or standby. Defend front giving minus 50% front enemy advancement speed, which is a significant amount, or advanced one gives you plus 10 front advancement speed, which is cool because the same army group can fulfill different goals because of the 4 separate officers, I guess, or generals really. Now for each of these separate formations, we also can choose, of course, the type of unit, the type of artillery, and the type of support unit, I guess you would call it, right? The Hussars, Dragoons, Cuirassiers. Whenever I see Dragoons, I think of the Dragoons from the Patriot, you know. It's also a lot easier to see the morale of each army formation since it's shown over at the top over here, as well as the expense for each army formation. So I guess that's based off on the size, or I don't know what it's based off of, but it's definitely based off of different things. There you go. Wait, so if you recruit a general, is it getting more expensive? Nope, doesn't seem so. Maybe because I didn't unpause, could be also because of that. But yeah, it's nice to see that. And of course, you can have different types of units for each formation. Doesn't have to be all of them the same type of unit. Again, can be a interesting thing if you want to cuss caught and you want to fight an enemy with a weaker unit because they are weaker, and another enemy with a stronger unit because they are stronger, right? The navies also have a similar model here with the formations and with the 4 generals that they can have recruited, or I guess admirals really. You also have the type of navy unit. Of course, this is a placeholder, I'm assuming. It's not gonna be a bunch of soldiers on land for a light ship. And then the capital ships also here are a separate thing, and for now that is the man of war in our particular case. We're gonna do a fake war just so it can illustrate a few things here. So let's attack, say, the Austrians for humiliation. We can force diplomatic play from the start. This will trigger instantly a diplomatic play and will escalate into a war eventually, or we can just not do that and they will maybe accept sometimes. In our case, they will not accept, so we have to force diplomatic play, whatever the case, right? But it can happen that they will accept without forcing a diplomatic play, so keep that in mind. In the case of the Germans, we got both the national identity and the Schleswig-Holstein journals active from the beginning now, so that's a little bit of a nice quality of life improvement, as I like to call it. Now let's mobilize our troops since we started our war, and we're going to deploy them over to the front. Hopefully, if we're lucky, the Austrians are going to get supported by the Russians, because I want to show you a few other things here. What happens when the front enlarges? It happened. The Russians have helped them. Now, as you can see over here, guys, the Austrians have swayed the Russians to join the war against me by giving the province, well, the subject of Krakow, which is an Austrian subject. So that's a new change in 1.5, and it is a very significant change because it's not the case anymore that you can ask the big powers to join in a war and then you just give land from the enemy, which you likely never will give. No, now look at this. If I want to call in the French, I can give obligations as before, or I can try and give them one of my subjects. I only have Hohenzollern, so they will apparently accept if I give them Hohenzollern. Alternatively, we can still do the old version of war goal, sway with transfer subject, transfer liberate country, etc. on the enemy, or transfer state. Basically, we give away our states to the French in order for them to join in the war against the enemy. So there's more options. That's part of the Diplo changes and the Diplo revamp that I was talking about. That makes a huge difference. I'm gonna sway them with obligations. I feel like in my case that would be the easiest choice. And now let's go back to the military screen, because look at that, we only have one front here, and the French, since they joined, they're bringing in units here to our front. There you go. We got 90 of the French 2nd Army, another 15 of the French 15 Army, or sorry, French 4th Army, and so on, with another front being opened, I'm guessing somewhere here. I might be wrong about that. No, I think they just have 75 units chilling in the south of front's not actually doing anything. Fair enough. But yeah, because we're at war with the Austrians and the Russians, we have one front, both of them merged, so it's a lot easier to keep track of it. Before, it used to be so annoying because you used to get a separate front with every separate country. So you used to have a front with the Austrians, another front with Krakow, another front with the Russians, and it would have been a nightmare to just move things around. Now, in return, we go to this and we click on the army and we give them the orders, advance, or whatever you want to. You can also just click here if you want, it's easier. There you go, advance, make sure everybody's advancing. We also can go to our military lens and we can designate strategic objectives. This way it's easier for us to inform our generals which part of the enemy states we are most interested in getting, of course. So for example, if we want to get Moscow and, you know, Kaputski the war a little bit faster, our units are going to try their best to move towards Moscow. Wait, is that actually Moscow? I think that's Moscow, isn't it? Or vice versa, we can do two objectives, one towards Vienna, which I think is here, and another one towards Moscow, right? And then our generals will do everything in their ability to try and advance towards there. However, I didn't pay for them. I didn't do a lot of things. So like I said, it's a phony war. Likely we'll be losing this, but just to point out how the new war system works and how, in my opinion, it is a massive step forward. This particular screen here might also be a little bit changed by the point that 1.5 is out, or maybe after 1.5 in a future patch is going to get changed. But we do know that they plan on making more changes to the combat system of Victoria 3, including a lot of the screens and a lot of the information that these screens give us. Look at that. We see here even the cultures of the casualties: North Germans, French, Alemannic, Occitan, North Italian, Polish, and so on and so on. To be fair, that particular bit is not actually new, but you get my point. They also mention in the dev diary that the naval invasion right now is unintuitive. It has an unintuitive UX flow, and they're right about that. And it's one of the main things that they will fix with 1.5. So keep that in mind if you're going to get the beta patch. What they did with the Navy is not finalized. You've got a pretty self-explanatory way of understanding how exactly you can use your fleets. It's written here, and you can tell from the way that it's written here that it's really not intuitive at all right now. And it's even less so when you actually look at the UI. They also mentioned some of the issues right now, such as morale loss does not work correctly in battles, and that is a massive issue, which hopefully is going to be fixed by the time 1.5 comes out of beta patch. The side that I like the most out of the patches, though, is the improvement side. You guys can thoroughly read this. I personally think some of the changes here should have been available from the start of the campaign, from the release of Victoria 3. But I'm still really glad that they've added them even now. For example, the experimental train really reminds me of Victoria 2. You guys probably remember the noise when you got the first experimental train, which was the level 1 train for your states in Victoria 2. That was a good feeling, wasn't it? So now, speaking of when you go over to your railway, once you've built it, you have experimental train, steam train, electric train, and diesel train. It's a lot different than it used to be prior to 1.5, and it's a massive improvement. Now, as you can tell, each of these improve the amount of infrastructure that they offer, with the top tier giving 40. But in my opinion, considering the amount of coal, engines, oil, electricity, or so on that these trains require, I kind of feel like, you know, they should be offering more than just 40 infrastructure, in my opinion. But hey, that's just me. There's been some changes to legislation. So for example, colonial exploitation law lowers manufacturing throughput in unincorporated states by 10%, but it boosts throughput of mining, plantation, rubber, and logging, which means that it essentially encourages you to have unincorporated states in resource-rich colonies rather than, you know, having them in your own main states. So that's why it kind of is a benefit having unincorporated states in Africa, in South America, in the Indonesian bits, for example, since you would get more throughput from your mines, from your whatever unique resource that you're getting from there, which you would not be getting in your home states. So it really changes the dynamic, since now the meta is no more just colonial resettlement. Sure, it still offers 50 migration attraction, which is a big deal, but this right here offers 20% plantation, mines, forestry, and rubber plantation throughput, which is a huge deal. So you're essentially not gonna build any manufactories in your colonies, but you will exploit the schnapps out of it. Good old European fashion. Oh god, we're role-playing the European colonies, aren't we? To go alongside that now, the unincorporated states have minus 10% state access price impact, which is, you know, a little something to go alongside it. They've also adjusted the secondary production method on textile mills, furniture manufacturers, glasswork, and chemical plants, so they are profitable. That was an issue with the previous patches. It would end up, because of the secondary production method, that some of these would not be as productive as they should have been. There's also been some AI changes, really good AI changes, amongst which the fact that if a nation has a truce with you, they're less likely to join a diplomatic play against you, which, you know, kind of should have been in for a while now, but it's good that it's in now. You know, it makes a big difference. There's also some interface changes and some art changes you probably noticed. Now, I wanted to make this quick update on Victoria 3 because I'm really enjoying the game. I actually am really enjoying it. I know it's getting a lot of hate from some parts of the Paradox community because everybody was expecting it to be essentially Victoria 2 with better graphics, and it's a brand new game with its own features and functionalities. It does try to appeal to a wider audience than just basement dwelling virgin areas. So of course said virgin areas are going to be a little bit pissed with the game. I get it. As a virgin area myself, I do get it. But honestly, the fact that I'm playing this game in my own time when I'm not recording for videos, for me, says that the game is enjoyable. And I think it has a bright future. With a few more changes to the combat system, it's probably going to take the limelight in a few years, depending on how the patching works and how the DLC works. And I wish it all the best and want to give a massive kudos to the development team for Vicky 3. You guys are doing an amazing job. Keep on doing what you're doing, and thank you for providing us with the entertainment that we absolutely need. Because, you know, we stay in the house the whole day. We need to do something. Come on, we gotta do something. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, check out my Germany Vicky 3 video up next. And I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers. I would not be able to do this without all your support.